Right. I think we're live, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the planet Earth. Welcome to the Sunday session. We're treating this more like a smoko, afternoon tea sort of session, you know, meeting somebody in the pub for after work, or any sort of relaxed way that you're doing. In the back of the ute, take that analogy as well. And just having lovely discussions about anything regenerative, or in our case, multi-species farming. What I would like to do for those of you that are not YouTubers and are having trouble trying to access YouTube or navigate YouTube, there's a really easy way. So I just want you to see this. You go to the, let me just rewind that a little bit. Go to farmingrevolution.com.au website. Scroll down the homepage and you will come across resources, events, and about us. Now, the one in the middle is the important bit. Press on the events button and it will go all the way through to the live section of Farming Revolution YouTube channel. As you can see, they're the lives that we've already done, and then this one on the left is the one that we are actually live on now. So on a Sunday morning, you know that we're going to be live at 9 o'clock. Even when the clocks change, it will still be 9 o'clock Queensland time. So we're going on Queensland time. I'll just show you that again so that you've all got that into your heads. This is just the easiest way if you're not a YouTuber, because we're not YouTubers, we are farmers, and you're going, oh, just something else for me to learn. Go to farmingrevolution.com.au, press the events button and it comes straight through. Press on the big picture if it's like 5 to 9 on a Sunday and just leave it open. We will eventually join you and you'll hear our voices, and then you're like, oh, great, the live stream has started. While we're there, go through exactly the same route to the live section, but can you see at the top, along the tabs there's membership. I'm just highlighting it now. Press on the membership. Once you've paid your $40 to be a member, this is another really easy way to access your membership channel. So you go through exactly the same format, go to events, it will take you to the live section, and then you just press on the membership button, and this is what you will see. So that is as it is at the moment until we start to grow month by month and have more and more videos to show, okay? And then from there, you can pop back to the live area. In fact, you can go anywhere on the YouTube channel. Okay. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming, Kevin and Martin. Russell sends his apologies. He's a truck driver as well as a farmer, so he's extremely busy this week driving around. He did want to be here, but has left his apologies. How was everybody's Christmas and New Year?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
I bet your mind was colder than yours.
Yeah, apparently it's meant to be -40 wind chill factor or something next week.
Next week, gotta love it.
For those of you that are watching live, please just type in where you're zooming in from around the world. And what's your weather like there? Is it -40 or is it +40? Okay, so while we are getting into the swing of things, I would like to start with my language, the use of language. And this week it's C for customer versus consumer. All right. So what is the difference and why am I bringing this up? I feel that language is a really big part of not using the best of examples that we can use. So, for example, when you're talking in the regenerative circles, we really don't want to be talking about consumers, because consumers is the extraction model. It is linear, okay? Whereas customers, it's circular and it's sustainable. And as you can hear, circular and sustainable are words that we really like. So I'm just going to give you an example before we get into the back to basics, which was the video that was released this month. Hello, Christine from WA. Oh, dew point morning. Excellent. Okay, I love a bit of dew on the ground. Okay, so a consumer, let's have a look at the extraction model. So if we take the electric car, for example, we have copper, cobalt, lithium, and nickel being mined. Plus, you've got the metal for the actual construction of the car and the plastics within the car. So that's all extraction. Then what happens is it gets put together, it's produced, it then is sold, you buy it, you're a consumer, and then you use it, it has a shelf life, and then when you're finished with it, it pretty well gets parked in an electric car graveyard. So you can see that's a linear example. Being a customer, I will use another example, is when if you're farming and you're producing food, and I'm just going to go down this example with sending your food that you've produced to a restaurant. The restaurant then is your customer. Your customers at the restaurant eat that wonderful food that you've prepared, but you have green waste. Now, green waste gets sucked up into either a compost person or a worm farmer, and they are your customers, the restaurant's customers as well. And then what they produce at the end is either compost or worm extract, and then their customer is the farmer, because the farmer then uses that on the land to fertilize their crops and their food, which then goes to their customer, which is the restaurant. So you can see this is a beautiful closed loop system, and it's all involving customers. So I really want everybody, when you're using customers or consumers, to be really aware of when you use each word in which context. Okay, so customer is circular and sustainable, consumer is linear and extraction. Now, the interesting thing is when I set up the website, you'll see consumer, consumer, consumer all the way through. And now I've actually got my web designer to start to take out those words and place customers instead, because I just wasn't happy with that word consumer. So I have changed, and I have learned over these few years that I've been in these circles. Okay, please put any comments, be brave, just add anything you like. It's really lovely. This is the whole point of these live sessions, is that you interact with us as well. Even if we don't agree with your opinion, it doesn't matter. It's your opinion. That's fantastic. That's where, as Martin likes to say, the robust discussions come into play. And we are having smoko at the moment on a Sunday morning. Okay, Martin, we will add this wonderful diagram that I put together. So when I came to Martin, so Martin organised the field day on Darren Rudford's farm. He hosted it, and he was he took it back to basics. So I drew this diagram so that we could actually see it in a visual form, because I'm very visual, as you know, with my videos. I like everything in front of my eyeballs so that I can process the information. So Martin's going to discuss things. Now, just before he does, I just want to highlight the fact that profit is a massive subject, and so are regenerative principles. So they are going to be completely separate lives. We will have great fun discussing those. But today we are really looking at back to basics, your context and your options. And I have a banner here. Look at this. Oh, tricky stuff I'm learning. Okay, so Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tamzin, and welcome aboard, everybody, for our first inaugural one discussing the videos that we present through the week or through the month. So with the back to basics, Tamzin came along and listened to most of it, and was doing the videoing, and these were the things that Tamzin took out of what we did that day, and then put them together in a flow chart or in a diagram. Anyway, the first thing is congratulations to Tamzin for putting it together in a flow like that. What we're doing when most of the things I really like I really want to achieve with that is helping people and helping them think through their system so that they can take stuff home and use it on their own farm. So when we've taken notes and that sort of thing at a field day or whatever, if we take them home and if we start, and this is a very good way to do it, is on a big piece of paper and put some things out and lay them out. And then that's how it really helps us think holistically, is that when we've got them there and we start joining the different things together, and when we get away from just being linear, I'm a bit of a dot point man for making notes and that sort of thing. That's fine. But if we can get our dot points and start joining them together like this, that really helps us think about things and really gets back and gives us, I guess, our principles. And then when we start thinking some more about it, how it fits in for our farm or in our life or in our situation, that's when we bring in context into it. So, it's just really important to work out where these things join up and go together, and it really helps us look at the big picture. And with that, so back to basics is when we're going back to basics, it's just our foundational stuff, the really simple stuff, and when we're doing it with, it's good to revisit, and especially when we want to change it up to a regenerative space about how we go about it. Really, when we're farming, the most basic thing we're doing is turning carbon dioxide, sunlight, and water into carbohydrate. That's the most basic thing that we're doing. So, and we've got to get back to focusing on that. And, and then, when we work out and we understand about how diversity and holistic all works together and the synergies and everything on that, then, that's where then we start building our photosynthesis program. And where we used to do it before and say, oh, well, we started with a seed and some fertilizer and plant it in the ground, then all of a sudden, we work out the diversity is very important in it. So then it's a multiple of seeds that we're doing, and there's other things that we have to look at and look after as well. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with back to basics.
Okay, would you like the subheadings then to lead you onto the video?
Yeah, righto. Yeah, so multi-species farming and then diversity. Like out of the big take-home message I've got really, and I suppose it was out there all the time, but I'm really only understanding it, or more recently. But what happens though is the more we deal with diversity, the more we understand it, and the more it works together. And in natural systems and in ecosystems, functional ecosystems, diversity is a driver. It's a big driver. The more diversity you got, the more functional your system is, the more cycling you're going to have, and just things keep moving forward. And yeah, I think the grazing management stuff, out of all the things I see driving around the countryside, the biggest place that we can pick up our act is quite often with grazing management. I've been around, had a look at, done all sorts of grazing courses. In the last 20 years, I haven't been really actively involved in grazing management, but I've looked at it and studied it and picked the eyes out of all the information that's around about. But grazing management is there's a lot of bang for buck to be had on that, because you're going to eat the grass anyway. If you go about eating it in a particular way, you'll grow more grass. And one of the things that I tricked up a little bit with the boys with their grazing management is they always talk about manage for what you want. You know, like some people try to get in there and nip all the seed heads off a plant that they don't want or something like that, for example. Then some people, and that's always sort of doesn't work like that. Then some people go in and graze for a particular, you know, their particular favourite grass or something like that. What I'm saying with grazing is do manage for diversity. So we want to see more diversity in our paddocks next year than what we saw this year. And also the thing to keep your eye on there is that is succession, and try and keep having better plants available to you next year than what you had last year, or this year than what you had last year. So that's on the grazing. Then like multi-species cropping stuff, it doesn't take very much to up the ante from monoculture crops. You just put another seed in with it and grow it. And then what we've been doing is growing 3, 4, or 5 different seeds, and that is working a treat. The list of good stuff just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. And you know, the only thing that sort of goes against us a little bit is that we can't just roar in there with the combine or header or harvester, put it in the back of the truck and flog it as a single species commodity crop. That's the only disadvantage. And there's plenty of ways and means about getting around that sort of stuff. But anything there, Kevin, that you want to chip in on or whatever?
Well, here we go to the same church, so it's not a problem there. One of the biggest things that when I'm talking to producers and they are intimidated, they either intimidated or they say no, this cleaning part of it, they don't want to do that. But you know, we can pick species that will either be biennial, so that this way they don't produce seed in that first year, or they're low growing, so we're going to be able to, you know, especially if we have a stripper header, we can harvest over top of it and leave that understory cover crop underneath. We still have the diversity, still building function to the system. Yeah, absolutely. The more functional plant groups that we have growing in the field, in rotation, it's building the legacy effect, it's building the microbiome, it's strengthening the microbiome of the plants we're growing. It's a win for our system, which means we're going to make more money.
So while you're on the multi-species there, Kevin, would you just like to discuss what happened here with this corn paddock?
So when the girls were going to uni, one of the things they said is, okay, we're going to grow a small patch of sweet corn, and whatever money they make, that's theirs for tuition and whatever else young people do when they go to uni. So one of the things we did was I seeded a cover crop of high clover, seeded it down first, and then went in with my zero-till corn planter and seeded the corn into it. And so what I did is basically a modified twin row. So we had 2 rows of corn at 30 inches, and then we had this 60-inch gap. Heard about these crazy Americans doing it, so I said, okay, let's try it here. And part of it was convenience of we can use our quad and go up, and we can pick corn much easier. And when people were buying the sweet corn from the girls, they would come back the next day and they said they've never tasted corn like that in their life. And so I, you know, depending on what kind of background the people had, you know, if you could talk about having this multi-species growing underneath this corn plant. So the clovers are going to be fixing nitrogen. They're going to be building mycorrhizal networks in the system. The corn is highly mycorrhizal. We're going to be getting a lot more nutrient dense food. And so this is one of the things when people talk about, you know, good food, what is the matrix? And when we can grow, so this corn that we're producing, these cobs of sweet corn, when they are eating it, we are now sharing the microbiome of all of these different species. So there's about 6 different species underneath this corn, and it's sharing the microbiome. it's getting the mycorrhiza going, it's getting the bacteria, it's getting the amoebas. We're getting all of this life in the soil, freeing up nutrients that is going to be getting into our food. And once again, it's going to be circular from the standpoint of people are going to come back, circle back to us to get more corn, because once again, it isn't just a commodity anymore. We're talking about there's some trait to this of more taste. We're talking about the bricks levels. Is just way more nutrient density to it, which is going to keep us healthier.
So I'll just go back to this diagram again, because on the bottom you can see the diversity is the absolute rock solid bottom, and then your grazing management and multi-species cropping is just the next stage up. Through those three foundations, which are, we were saying, back to basics, if you really break down everything into its basic format, these three are really at the bottom, and they're the foundations. So then as you move up via profit, your context and your options is now your opportunities. So Martin, would you just like to discuss, and maybe we'll go back to this one because the resets and the other part is part of the context and your options, managing your options.
Yeah. What if we'll start with a little story, and that'll go with and that'll be part of options, right? Is that not this last season, all the mixed species that we grew, we harvested, but the year before that, we got in early and dry with our mixed species, and we didn't get very much rain. Only got a few small showers of rain, but that was enough rain to get our mixed species to come up. But all the other boys that were waiting to have enough moisture stored in their ground for their regular crops to come up, they didn't ever think that they had enough moisture to bring their crop up, because the little bit they got would disappear, and then they get a little bit more, and then it disappeared, a little bit more, and it disappeared. Whereas we were in early, and the little bit we got started it, and a little bit more grew it a little bit more, and then a little bit more got it up to, a reasonable amount. And so by the time, with not very much rain, we had a reasonable amount of feed in our paddock, and none of the other boys had planted their crop. And so by that time, we're into a season that's not going very well at all. We take our eye off the ball a little bit with some livestock, the amount of livestock we had. And we had one particular mob of sheep that were not in good shape, a bit skinny. They had little lambs on them, and then we just made the decision to put the sheep in on that mixed species crop, and so those lambs just jumped out of their skin right away. Went really well. The ewes got fat, and only in like a couple of months they went from being skinny, where they were nearly going to die, to being where they could have gone to the market as fat sheep. So that particular paddock really saved our bacon in a skinny year. And I was talking to Darren about it the other day, and I said, the first 2,000 acres of crop that you plant this year should be multi-species crop. And I said, because the main reason that you do it that way is because that's your plan B, right? There's nothing like having a plan B when you run out of plan A. And if you can do it, but the thing is if the season rolls out well, and then you have got plenty of feed and you don't have to feed that off to your sheep as a plan B, well, then it just goes back to being plan A, and it becomes a harvestable crop at the end of the season. So this is what we talk about when we talk about options and opportunities. Like, it doesn't have to be, rocket science or anything, and just about thinking ahead, and, using those diagrams and thinking holistically, and it's not, I don't know. I don't think you can really call it thinking out of the square, because it's pretty common sense. But the agronomist that comes to you from Landmark or Elders or Nutrient or whatever, they're not going to talk through systems like that with you. So that's where I'm coming from with options.
Well, the sales agronomists, they have their own box they want to keep you in.
Yeah. So have you had much experience with grazing, Kevin?
Yeah, I would say about 2/3 of my the people I work with are in the hay, silage, and grazing component. Even with the grain people, I've you know, on our farm for 20 years, we always had livestock on our farm during our winter months when we have this thing called snow. And at no time did I ever own any animals. I'm an agronomist by training. The livestock, these people, that's their living, is to raise livestock, and in a lot of cases it was beef cattle. And so this is what they were doing for a living. So why would I go through the learning process of trying to figure that out and only do, you know, half a job of it and not get the return? Whereas the agronomy, you know, to grow a crop like this and to understand, you know, how important diversity is, it's translated well for me. So now, you know, some of the livestock producers that I'm working with, in particular, there's the dairies. Dairies are so easy to see the changes real quickly because a lot of them have robots for milkers, so everything's computerized, and they're really meticulous about data. And so there's one of the first dairies I worked with, we got him into very diverse mixes, and his you know, basically the next day after changing from his high starch diets into a plant-based diet, in his robots, the animals responded the next day. Milk production's up, milk fat's up. Within very short period of time, all of a sudden herd health goes up, and, you know, profitability basically tripled overnight. So it's really neat seeing stuff like that. Never mind the fact that you know, having grain guys putting in a relay cover crop underneath their cash crop that's going to be green in after harvest, so that now we can get livestock impact on there. It's huge on how we can speed up the whole soil health and regenerative process.
So going back to the dairy farmers, so when they're in the robotic dairy being milked, they're not needing to feed the grain. Is that correct?
Correct. We've got most of the starch. You know, I always ask when we start talking about animal nutrition, I keep asking the livestock producers, when they've ever had to kill an animal and they got them, how many gizzards do they see in a ruminant? They're not designed to have high starch. Ruminants are based on, you know, the stuff behind me here. It's plant material, and when we can get the starch out and get the high water soluble carbohydrate into the animals, it's amazing how quickly animal production actually gets back to where it should and could be. So in other words, a lot of old nutritionists don't like talking to me because yeah, I'm kind of, once again, box. Yeah, there's a box over there, but I don't pay attention.
So just for those people that have just joined us, what we're doing is we're integrating the video that you would have seen. If you remember, you would have seen the whole video, which was about half an hour, which is Back to Basics with Darren Mudford and Martin Williams. Darren Mudford is a farmer who has a really amazing business brain on his shoulders, and I love visiting his farm because every time I go there, it's just improve, and he doesn't overthink things, and he is open to what his observations, what he's seen. And it's amazing that he's actually got to the stage where the logistics of harvesting his multi-species is an issue now, because of course he's got his seed grader, which is Martin Williams, sitting here, and there's only one of him and one 4-way grading machine on his farm. So Martin, just have a chat about that with regards to the video Back to Basics and the 3 or 4-way mix that you're grading.
Yeah. Can you roll that? We had that video one time before, Tamzin. Have you got that available or not?
I could probably get it, but you'll have to talk for a little bit. The one that we played last week.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I might have it.
Anyway, it's not. It's like all of that machinery that I've got out there at the moment was probably built in the 60s. Some of it would have been built in the 60s maybe, and some in the 70s. So it's not like it's state of the art, or that we've got any, particular fancy machinery or whatever. It's all just simple, pretty simple stuff. There's a bit of you need to know what each different machine does to do, and then just configure them and set them up in a line. And we did that bit where we worked it out in our head and on a piece of paper which direction how we thought we were going to get the flow of it to work. Anyway, with that, our original process, we were going through it once, and then we had to go and run it again. Anyway, because we got to and we had a go and we worked out what was going on, and we sort of fiddled up our flow chart again. Now we've got it set up where it's one pass, and we're doing a good job where each of those different seeds, then it's definitely able to sell it. Like the one we did this year was canola, lupins, and wheat, and all the wheat has gone already. I think the lupins has gone already. Sold as just monocrop commodity crops, and then the canola came out in reasonable order, but we just ran that again because we wanted to use some of that for seed, and we're going to have that. We'll have that seed available for people if they want canola seed that's been grown in a multi-species this year. So when we divided those things up, they're not in a position that we can use them just as a monoculture seed. We need to tidy them up when we use them for seed. As commodities, they're fine, but as the seed, we run them again through another process and tidy them up a bit more. So we're going to have the radish and canola available this year. We grew some oats
because it's back to basics.
That's not the one, I don't think, Dan. Anyway, where was I? So yeah, we just we're running it through the machinery. Now you're muted, Tamzin.
Sorry, this is what happens when you ask me to do two things at once. If Darren, how are you overcoming the logistics? If Darren wants to grow more multi-species because the business, the profit margin and the business side of it is screaming at him, yes, do more. How are you as a seed grader going to handle the volume of the multi-species?
Yeah, this year we thought we were going to be able to do some grading at harvest time. But anyway, as it turned out, with like no excess labour available, like everybody that was there at harvest time was doing a job. That included me, actually, because I was driving a truck. So we're up that red auger into an aspirator, and then 2 screening machines. You're muted again.
This is why we need to be organised before we start.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway, I sprung that one on you.
Okay, so I do have it now. So if you want to watch it at all, just let me know. I've got it.
Oh, I'll just step you through it.
You want to go? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There's double us now. Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, there we go. Is it playing? Oh yeah, I think you're meant to be talking about it now. Yeah, it is playing.
Yeah, well, it's coming up that red auger and into an aspirator. So the aspirator's got an airstream going through it, so it takes the light stuff off. Then it goes down, and there's two screening machines under that. The top screening machine in this situation was taking the lupins were being retained above the screen, and then the wheat and the canola went through to the next screen, and the canola got screened off of that screen, and then the wheat went up. So they went into the first two bins. Then the wheat with some wild oats. There was some wild oats in that crop. They went into that next indent machine, and the wild oats got taken off of that one. Then it went up into another indent machine, and there was a bit of volunteer radish, because that got planted on a paddock that was radish not the season before. There was volunteers in it the season before, but the season before that it was a mixed species with radish in it. So we took we might have got a half a ton of radish seed out of that crop, and that was going into that bulker bag there. And then the wheat was going up that orange auger into that bin that's right in the centre of the picture now. So there's, it's all machinery that's available. You can get it. In time, I'm planning on having my machinery mobile. One of the advantages of it being like this is that we can just mix and match it somewhat, because at the end of the day, this is the first time we've been doing this stuff, and we had some learning to do too. Yeah, that's good, Tamzin.
Okay, so it's just all right. There we go. Okay, so that's your managing your options in your context.
Right. Yeah, just one other thing there that I didn't answer your question is that one of the things that's probably going to have to happen to be able to expand it out is that we're going to have more on-farm storage. So, like if you're going to have 2,000 acres of multi-species that you could be dealing with, probably good that you had 2,000 tons of storage to go with it. So that'll be, but that solves our logistical problems there, because once we've split it up, we can be sending it into smaller bins or marketing it directly or whatever.
So Kevin, how do you manage your options when you are harvesting?
Well, that's as I guess taking a step backwards, give you more history on our operation. My grandfather started. He homesteaded in eastern Saskatchewan in the mid 1930s, and he started growing seed oats as his farm income, his diversification. And so we've been growing, pedigreed seed since the late 1930s. And so it's kind of in the blood. So when we started getting into the polycropping, it really stressed my dad out because we didn't go from uniform monocultures to these mixes. So I actually emailed. I tried figuring out how to export some pictures as PDF. So I just emailed them over to you with a couple of our cleaning systems. And so one of the things that one of the biggest weeds that we had on our farm was something called Roundup Ready canola, because we were growing Roundup Ready soybeans at the time. So there was no easy way of getting that canola, killing that canola without creating harvest problems, because canola, trying to kill it, it doesn't like dying. When you don't want it there, it doesn't want to die. If you're trying to grow it as a cash crop, well, it always wants to die on you. So the first thing we did was we bought a rotary cleaner. We put a bigger sprocket on it to slow down the rotation of that cleaner, and it separated a lot of the canola out really, fairly effectively. So then from there, we put it in through our regular seed cleaning equipment. So just a wind and screen. And if we needed, we had an indent. And that was our setup for separating. So as long as you have that seed size separation, as Martin has said for the last how many months when you're picking species, we need discrepancies between your bushel weight, your plant your seed density. You need seed size differences, and if you get into the spot where you're using optical cleaners, but you can get into color separation. Yeah, there it is. How's that for a really high tech system? So we would convey the soybeans and our canola into that the rotary cleaner, and we would have an auger on the right hand side where the shovel is, where it's taking the canola away, and the soybeans are going into the small transfer conveyor into the leg and into our cleaning plant. So was it really high productivity from the standpoint of doing lots of bushels per hour? No, but it did a decent job. And once again, the amount of if we're dealing with a high value crops that we're separating, we can afford to be going slower. If we are dealing with a commodity that is a low value per bushel, it really is tough to justify spending time doing lots of separation. Saying that, with this regenerative group that we're dealing with in Western Canada, that dairy is one of them that's involved. One of the things that when the dairy cows are going through the robot milkers, they have a little treat bowl that when the sensor reads the ear, okay, you haven't been milked, or you haven't been milked 4 times today. Okay, so out comes a little treat, and he was using oats and he was using peas, just a couple cupfuls of it. So he was buying his oats, he's buying his peas, he'd mix them together as he want, and then put it into his feed bill. One of the other the people within the group, he was growing oats and peas together, and he said, well, instead of buying your oats and your peas separately, I've already have them mixed. And they negotiated, came up with a price. He did a feed test on it, and one of the things that he found was the feed test of the oats grown by themselves, so in monoculture, the peas growing by themselves in a monoculture, got the feed test back on that. He did the feed test of the oats and peas that were grown together. Both the oats and the peas grown in this polycrop were higher nutrient value than the monocrops that were grown separately. So if we can find these markets, and once again, there's lots of critters around Australia, and in the Midwest, I think there are some critters walking around there too in the United States. All of a sudden, with these mixed grains, there is a market that actually deserves a premium. So that whether we generate that value through feed tests, and when the livestock owners start feeding it and they start seeing animal response, then that is a win-win. So there are some really neat things that can be done. It's now talking to someone to buy the grain that isn't sitting in that same box that the rest of the industry is at. If they're like-minded, like what we're thinking, then they're going to be able to buy in and make it work for themselves.
So Martin, that kind of leads to what you and Darren have noticed. I know it's only an observation. I don't think there's been any testing, has there? But with the lupin crops that you've been growing in the multi-species? Or it could even be the data.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that came there, Tamzin, we had the monoculture lupin crop, and we were thinking about using some of it for seed. And when we did a germination test on it, the germ was way low on the monoculture lupin crop. We tested the lupins that came out of the multi-species, and then that was there was no problem with the germination there. And so the multi-species lupins was what was used to grow our next monoculture lupin crop.
And wasn't there? Sorry, just on that bit, wasn't there a neighbour of Darren's who grew his own lupins as a monoculture, but he couldn't? His germination rate was so bad that he ended up having to buy some off Darren. Is that correct?
That was the same year, and he had the same problem with his lupins where he had low germination. I can't remember whether he bought his lupin seed off Darren or not. I don't remember. But just back on the one with the dairy, so Rod Hetherington, he's another one of our guys, and we'll probably get him on the show later on. But he's growing multi-species in Western Australia, and he has already got an understanding with a dairy that he supplies to there, and they're going to be repeat buyers. They did it one time when they were happy with the result, and I think it's something like they're going to pay to have their own storage out at Rob's farm, so that they can just get a regular truckload of a month or whatever it is of the mix that he's grown for them into the dairy. And absolutely, they saw a result like in the milk vat from using those that mixed species crop grains. So they didn't take very much getting on board, and they are on board with him. So it's about building relationships. We've gone through all that stuff before about being relational and transactional. And that's one of the dramas that you've got with selling bulk commodities. A lot of the time, the guys that are buying it off you, they don't really care too much about what they're buying. All they want to do is nail you down on the price and buy it for the least amount of money that they possibly can. And in our commodity systems and that, when you're selling it, and they chip you about having wild oats in it, weeds and downgrade and this and that sort of thing, and even the protein and screenings and that, all it is about beating you down on price. So whereas what Rob's got going on with those guys over there, it's they've got a relationship, and they're saying to him, whatever you put in the silo, we'll buy. And I think they've already negotiated the rate. So it's working for everybody, and there's a relationship going on there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the value exchange is more important. Now, Kevin, sorry, go for it.
That's all. It's all good.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Kevin, you sent me some interesting photos, and because you were going to talk about opportunistic farming, which we kind of already have sort of led into, but is there anything specific with the photos that you've sent me, particularly this one here?
If anybody's feeling a little warm, so these bison, the last couple of years on the farm, we were custom grazing bison. We'd bring them in November, and we would have stockpiled cover crop out in the field. And the last year, I felt sorry for them. So for 85 animals, I bought them 11 green feed bales that were about 500 kgs. So that's what they that kept them through all the winter. And when the owner picked them up in April, and so these are all heifers except for number 25. She was the matriarch of the group. Bison during the winter traditionally don't put weight on, but when he picked up these heifers, he said, "Oh, they're a little on the fat side." So they weren't getting much for grain. I would just go out there, so they would recognize me in my ute, give them a little bit of grain, make sure get a good look at them, and but it was chicory, plantain, sandfoin, Japanese millet, Italian ryegrass, festiole. You go through the list of basically everything that we had access to, put it out there, and yeah, they did extremely well.
Is this one of the things you fed them?
Yeah, that was at Sandfoin. So that's a non-bloat legume. That's one thing that in the pasture manuals, this is one thing that they are doing some trials on in Western Australia. It performs well on sandy soils in dry conditions, has a nice deep taproot. Animals will preferentially graze it, so it will weaken in a stand really quickly if it's not managed. But what a great opportunity to, once again, diversify, to put it into whether it's cash crop ground or just another weird type of plant to put out there to help build soil and build the plant and animal health.
So is it a type of vetch?
No, it's not a vetch. It is a I'd have to dig in to see what the Latin name of it is, but it is a non-bloat legume. I call it an early successional plant because if you just continuously hayed it or silaged it or grazed it, it would last for about 4 or 5 years. But if you allow it to go to seed every couple of years, then it can reseed itself and perpetuate. So,
wow.
So I have some hope that this one will take off in WA and the dry areas of Queensland, New South Wales, and it's easy enough because it's a large seeded, so it's probably a little bigger than what hairy vetch is for seed size, but it's elliptical, kind of like a lentil for shape. So seed production is quite possible, and it can be fed through the mineral, and it'll pass through the animal, and it can reseed itself through that way also.
That's so amazing. I've never seen or heard that before. And so you're believing that it will take off in WA, maybe not in the farming sphere, but actually in the paddock, because of the drought or the drier conditions, which is similar to Canada when you have your winter and the snow.
Well, exactly, and it doesn't do well once you start moving further north. So where Martin was, he spent most of his time. That's kind of transitional from the dry part of Saskatchewan to the wet. So when we're up in Spalding, moisture is better. Doesn't do as well. You start moving it south, it tends to establish and compete very well. And being non-bloat, that's a positive. It's fairly high tannins. But really quite palatable. So the question is, the name of the plant is sandpoint. I'll type that one in. Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Is that spelled
3 steps
correctly?
ahead of me. So these are some of the things. And so when I was over in WA and talking to producers, one of the things that Saskatchewan, the province in the middle of Canada, it is known for its #1 producer in the world of exporter of mustards, lentils, canary seed, linseed, and so as Martin, I was hoping we were going to catch up to Martin and go through I was going to show him some of these other crops in Saskatchewan, like canary seed. Okay, it's kind of limited market, but it's more of a birdseed market. But like lentils, to throw some lentils in some of these mixes, to throw in some canary seed. There's a market for it, and it's a nice small.
Excuse me a second there, Kevin. The cool thing about that, if you're throwing those things in, is they're not expensive seed.
Exactly.
So you're doing and they do grow in Canada. And that's one of the things that we've got to do is, and that's context. Look at what does grow in your area, what grows well, what's got cheap seed, and put this stuff together in our mixes.
Oh, it's sesame. I tried growing sesame on the farm, and both times that I seeded sesame, the first time it was I seeded a little late, and that was one of the years that never rained until July, so it didn't do very well. And then the second time I had them growing up in rows. I had it intercropped with some sorghum, and my dad was out spraying, and he did a pass, and he said, "Why were these weeds growing in rows?" No, that was my sesame. So once again, small seeded, drought tolerant, but still a different functional plant group that we can get in with a weird seed size, so that this way, if you know what linseed looks like, the canary seed is going to be the same seed shape, a little different color, so you can't mix the linseed and the canary. But why aren't there some more chickpeas? Why isn't there more lentils being grown? Why isn't there, all of these different crops in Western Canada? Well, Martin, you've been here. How much different is it in Western Canada than Australia?
No, there's not. Well, contextual. You get a heap of snow and that sort of thing, and we get a hot summer. That's context. But as far as the principles that we use on what we're doing, that's the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to go through and look for these opportunities. And once again, you're going to need to be a little bit of an entrepreneur. You're going to have you know, number one, you need the volume. If we're going to be looking at exporting, you need the volume to find a buyer for it. But on the small market, like if you had some sunflowers and you had canary seed and maybe some proso millet, there's another opportunity. Well, there's your sunnies. Now we can put that into a birdseed mix, because the amount of birdseed that New York City alone, the canary seed, I think they were talking 3 rail cars per week of canary seed, and that was just to feed the pigeons in Central Park. So that when you look at Sydney, you look at Perth, you look at wherever there's birds and there's people, eating birds is so relaxing for city folk. So to have some of these grains and developing a birdseed market, it's crazy. Is that the right word? How much people will spend on something that it's calming. It gets them back to nature. And if you can make a dollar doing it, well, that works in my books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
totally
one of my little hacks is, if people want to grow a cover crop for their garden or something in the summertime, is you take that bird feed mix, and it's got sunnies and sorghum and millet and corn in it, and that's a perfect little mix, and it's cheap when you like a lot cheaper buying it that way than trying to buy it from the seed companies. So yeah, that's a good little hack for growing your summer mix, and you can even grow that. There's no worries about growing that on a bit more extensive areas too. Like there's guys, because you can buy feed mix in a bird mix in a 20-kilo bag, and if you're only putting that out at a kilo, you might only need it out at a kilo per hectare. So that's an option too. All these little things, these little tricks that we come across when we're doing stuff. But
absolutely. And if you read Jerry Brunetti's book, Farmer's Ecosystem, one of the things that he talks about is having strips around each one of your paddocks as a pollinator mix. Yeah. And what that does is it's a refuge, kind of like this thing behind me in the background. It gives a refuge to your predator insects, which is then going to help your any disease outbreaks or insect outbreaks in your paddocks. So the way you gain the income out of it, so if you're looking just as a passive expense, now you have some of these other species of this polycrop in with your pollinator mix. You harvest it, and there's your birdseed mix. The other really crazy thing for income, if you want to make what I call gross income, you grow these pollinator mixes, and if you sell them by the bunch for $5 per bunch, do you know how many bunches you can have off of 1 hectare of land? And tax wise, it's really confusing, because when we are when you're selling all this stuff for cash, how do you claim that for income so the government gets their fair share? It's really confusing that way.
I wouldn't. Wouldn't confuse me. I'd keep the cash.
And if you get audited in the next little while, it's not my fault. Well, that's the whole thing. This is that whole thing of, when we want to make serious money in agriculture, we produce food, kind of like that sweet corn that I was doing, or you produce something recreational. And when we start doing that, like one of the things that one of the concepts that someone was talking about, and I thought it makes really good sense, is creating a Facebook page and selling the 1 year of support for someone to seed down something like a pollinator mix. And so you put it out on Facebook, people from the city will pay you, $300 per hectare for seeding down this pollinator mix, and then this way they're feeding the insects. They're doing, all this good, and for $300 you can buy a lot of seed. You can do a lot of seeding. You can still get the grazing out of it, but it's bringing value to the urban folk to make that connection, so that this way you can take pictures of that 1 hectare, explain what's happening, what you're growing, and then from there, how is it helping? Never mind the carbon sequestration, all that other stuff. It's that whole development of a brand new market that someone from the city is now being involved in agriculture.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. With marketing, there's a big thing there about selling the story. Absolutely. Yeah. And, just with our radish seed that we've got now, part of our story with that is that it's been grown as a mixed crop and has had no in-crop sprays on it for like 7 or 8 generations. Like if that doesn't sort of tickle you, you're probably not going to be a repeat customer of mine.
Now, just a question, Kevin. Do you have farmers who use multi-species for egg production?
Yeah, I saw that. Christine asked that one. There was actually one of the producers down near Lethbridge, so that's 2.5 hours south of where I am right now. I put together a blend for him, and basically it's the kitchen sink sort of thing. So there's oats, barley, wheat, triticale, linseed. He's organic, so it wasn't any canola, but sunflowers. We put some chicory and facili in there, which really didn't produce much for seed. So a really diverse mix. Once again, we can do the high grain content because these critters have a gizzard, so we can go high grain. So it's going through and having the warm season grasses, cool season grasses, some non-brassica forages. You stayed away from the brassicas just because of the GMO concerns, but created diversity. And same sort of thing. Sold it as a mix, put it on aeration so that this way, because of our harvest, we're getting cooler, we're getting a little more moist during harvest period. So we put on aeration so this way it stays, it gets down dry. And the egg producer got back to him and said, whatever you did, let's do more.
Fantastic.
So it's, once again, this whole legacy effect that Dr. Christine Jones talks about, the sharing of the microbiome, the synergies within the plant, building the mycorrhizae, it all drives. And, this is when we start talking regen ag. Martin sent me the video on the fungi. Absolutely. We get the fungi going, we get functionality back in our soils, and away we go.
So going back to language, with the extraction and sustainable parts, it's really challenging sometimes to actually, when you're dealing with your options, to actually be completely sustainable as you are developing a different system. So don't fear about being linear and using the extraction model if at the end of the day where you're going to is to regenerate so that you can then become sustainable. So it's not about, I hear so much, and I will do the language about the difference between regenerative, sustainable and organic. It's not, we all want to be sustainable, but because everything is run down so much at the moment, we have to regenerate. And so many people are scared of this word regenerate because they think that it's all been, I don't know, it's got boundaries, it's all been boxed in. But to regenerate literally means to make better. You are regenerating whatever it is, whether it's your life, whether it's your children's life, whether it's your land, whether it's your health, your bank account, whatever it is, to make it better is to regenerate. So when you are using your options in your context, don't be fearful of having to go down the extraction method just to start with to get yourself on the right foot. Have either of you got anything more to add about your context, your options, any examples, your opportunities? Because both of you using your principles, using the principles in your context, managing your options is all about opportunities. And so that was why Kevin was mentioning opportunistic farming, which I also love as well, because it's a real positive way. What opportunity have I got here? How do I access whatever it is I need? What systems and can I manage that in my context? Do I have somebody who's already doing it in my area? Those sorts of things. How do people move forward if, so just having that one plant, the sainfoin, how do you say it? Sainfoin.
Sainfoin. Yep.
Sainfoin.
Sainfoin.
Yeah, just two people from Australia have just gone, oh, what's the name? Oh, yeah, so they'll look into it now. So just having these little options here and different ideas, that's exactly why we're here on these lives doing that. Looks like your cover crop just ate you there, Kevin.
Yep. Okay, I just grabbed my book. I'll get you the Latin name so that this way, if anybody is interested in, I'm sure we can get it imported in. So sainfoin is.
So that's a good point there, Tim, in the comments. He says, I'm trying to do everything at micro scale. Perfect. Don't bite off more than you can chew, because the overwhelm, it will be instant. And unfortunately, you won't go forwards because it will just be too much. So there's the Latin name. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. Oh, no. Bricus philosopholia. My drunken version. All right, so Martin, have you got anything more to add to any of that?
Just moving forward one day, Tamzin, I think we need to slot in what we'll do is we'll have a talk about just principles, right? We'll be just talking about principles alone, and we'll like all the good guys have got a list of principles. They all vary a little bit, or whatever. But what we'll do, I think, is we'll have a robust discussion about principles, and we'll sort of dig down on each principle so that we get to understand it. Because when we understand it, then we can own it. Like sometimes, like one of Peter Andrews' ones. I'm not bagging him here or anything, but it's slow the flow. Now, what is slow the flow? You have to dig down on it and work out what it is. And mostly what he's talking about there is water. But then, if you're slow on the flow with water, you're slow on the flow with your soluble nutrients that are in that water as well. So, and then that's part of this, what we do if we dig down on that sort of stuff, and that helps us understand how everything is connected to each other and all these connections. They're the things that we've got to really get going on our head. And when we do that, then that helps with our observations. When we make our observations, we're not just observing one or two or three things and then thinking, oh, well, that was, this. Because like I always say, it's never ever one thing. It's always a combination. And when we start understanding the combinations that are going on, because all of that stuff goes on whether we understand it or not. And that's how nature works. And like, it's huge, like all the stuff. So that's about us learning about how nature works, I suppose, and taking our lessons from nature. I've had somebody recently saying to me, oh, well, I did this, this, and this, and it just doesn't seem to be working. Well, actually, whatever it was that happened worked. Just because it didn't line up with what you thought should have happened doesn't mean it didn't work. So, so then do we go to and fiddle around everything with nature so that it works like we think it should, or do we take the lessons from what it was teaching us and we start working with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why I'm back to basics. Like we got to just the fundamentals, the principles, and that sort of thing. We can get started, and that's an important thing to do too. And hats off to Darren for what he did. We went to Cole Sice's one time right in the beginning and had a day there, and Cole showed us this multi-species crop, and it might only had 2 or 3. It wasn't way multi. And Darren came home and he bought he bought a couple of things, and then found the rest of the things out of his silos, put them together and bashed them in, and that was the start. And we've been learning ever since then. But you don't, and what we've learned has been absolutely important, and we would never have learned if we didn't start. Then again, don't bank your whole farm on it. Start off and do small areas and think them through as much as you can, and then do it. And then get your buddies to come along and not just bragging about how much they grew. Not the pissing competition. We want to what went well here, what didn't. What do you think might have helped, or have you seen anything in the past where any of this? And that's sometimes when the old guys are good too, because the old guys used to do lots of different stuff and see different stuff as well. So, and again, that's just diversity. Diversity is a driver.
Now, I do just want to plump up what you've said about Stuart Andrews, because if you do watch some of the videos, because I've got a few with Stuart, he does absolutely mention keeping the fertility on your side of the fence, basically. So slow the flow will be definitely water and fertility. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But if you just take, I understand that. What I'm saying though is, if we just thought about it, about the first thing that comes into our mind, Peter Andrews is about water. So slow the flow, slow the water down. There's more things that always go with all of this stuff than that.
Okay, so language interpretation.
Yeah, for sure. And then, and interpretation and thinking about it. Like, what about anyway? And that's why if we just have a discussion about these the principles, each one, and just get them more in our head and understand what it is we're doing with each principle, so that we don't. We want them so that we don't have to think about them anymore. When you ever first learnt the ABC, you couldn't say it straight away, could you? But now we know ABC off by heart. What we need to do is understand our principles off by heart.
So that leads me into my ebook that will be purchasable, if that's a word, off my website, farmingrevolution.com.au. And that absolutely, the title is Multispecies Farming for Beginners, the 5 Principles to Manage for Landscape, Nature and Profit. So that will be available off farmingrevolution.com.au in the next couple of weeks. And then my website will be completely updated. And then that's when I'm hoping then in 2 weeks' time, or maybe the next month, we will be able to discuss principles, Martin. So I'll send you guys the ebook in PDF form, and we'll have something to natter about then.
Absolutely.
What would you like to add, Kevin?
Dealing with you two, it's always easy to say you nailed it. So.
Okay, and all right, so shall we wrap it up then? There was a question. She has a mystery with a recent biological soil test. Did you read this, Kevin? pH was 6.8. Traditionally, we come in below 5 pH on our country. We have not applied lime for 8 years, but get a pH of 6.8. Now, am I true in saying if we are talking about pH, the diversity of plants looks after that on its own?
Biology will get it to neutral, or close to a neutral pH. When it is at a 5, or if it's at an 8, why? It's because we've snuffed it up. We go back to native land, you do a pH in there, bang, it's neutral or close to it. And once again, if it is off, it's because there's some repercussion. Once again, it isn't just one thing. There's a series of things that's happened that have messed it up. So when we start that, well, the other really neat thing of when we start looking at pHs is so the 1 year I went out, I was doing some consulting work, and I was grabbing soil samples for producers. I went out and I was soil sampling in our fall right before freeze up, and I grabbed some soil samples, GPS benchmarked. Next day it snowed. Got the sample sent away. Results came back. I wasn't happy with them. They looked goofy. So I told the producer, I said, okay, when the snow leaves in April, I'm going to come out, GPS benchmark, I'll grab the same spots, I'll fire them in, no charge. And so I asked for the pH to be retested in the spring. So in the fall, it was dry. In the spring, we get the snow melt, so moisture recharges the soil. So we have lots of moisture. In the fall, the pH was 8.1. In the spring, it was 5.9. Wow. Same spot. Because when we have moisture, it releases organic acids, it drops your pH. Because of our soils, because of the way nature has designed things, there's buffer capacity. So it's going to bring it back to where it's able to. And so in the fall, it goes up. When it's dry, when it's wet, it goes down. Very fluctuating. And then when we start talking about the pH at the root level, at the root hair level, the pH can change by, I think Christine Jones was talking, it can go from a pH of 1 to 11 within micrometers in the soil. So yeah. Nature will do what it needs to do. As long as if we start throwing lime at it, I'm against lime in a lot of cases, just because when you put free lime in the soil, it messes up your soil chemistry. Anyways, there's my little rant. Then Christine Jones, Christine Smith. We've applied biological sprays for 8 years. That Johnson Sioux that you had underneath that tree, that's another really good story. Christine Christine Smith would be able to tell you about how she had a Johnson Sioux under a tree, and it was leaking out the good stuff out the bottom. The tree was thriving. I was out at her place. So yeah, getting this biology up and going, it's one of the crucial key points to speeding up the process of regenerating.
So diversity and biology. I might have to add biology to my diagram. Kind of forgot that a bit, didn't I?
The rabbit holes we're going to go down, you're going to be adding more and more to it, but just as simple, once again, you nailed it. The two of you did an awesome job.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to Christine Smith, Neil Brown, and Tim Falloids. If that's how you pronounce your name. Thank you for keeping the flow going in the chat. It's fantastic. This is what lives are all about, is to interact with you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin and Martin, as always. Fantastic live. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Tamzin.